Welcome again, folks. So we're about to start working on the back end here of this here fine automobile. First part, we were working on front end. We're waiting on parts for that. Did some engine stuff. If you haven't seen that part, go back and check that out. But this video is going to be a lot more information than it is going to be working, that type of stuff. So I'm going to do my best to try to explain parallel four-link suspension. That's what we're doing on here. I'm going to try to explain it the best I can, the simplest I can, so that anybody can do it. It's really isn't it's not difficult if you're not changing a lot of things on the vehicle. It can be done pretty simply. Therefore, I'm going to try to answer some questions that I've been asked a lot in the past, and hopefully I can do my best. If I fail to mention something here in the video, drop a comment in the down below, and I'll try to answer them best I can. So we're going to be going with a parallel four-link setup, and I'll explain why. Excuse me. I'll explain why that it's my preferred way to set things up. It's somewhat a little simpler. There's a few more parts involved, but overall it's very simple to set up. And obviously this is from our friends over at Infamous Fab. If you have not checked them out yet, you can go find it on my website as well as on Infamous Fab. I'll link them down below. But I've had these bars laying around for some time now. Kind of waiting to use them on something, so here we are. But first things first, we need to take a couple measurements. We're going to try to use the tape measure as least as we can, but we need to kind of get a baseline of what we're trying to accomplish. So I'm not trying to, on this here truck, I'm not trying to add any lift to it. I want to basically keep it the same height, the same stock height. It is leveled in the front, so if anything, I want to drop the back end just ever so slightly. These blocks here are like, they're like a 5-inch block or something, and I'm pretty sure, or 4.5, I'm pretty sure that's like their factory, whenever the four-wheel drives, I'm pretty sure that's factory. Not 100% sure, but basically the main measurement that we need here is we need to figure out our axle to frame, however you want to measure it. We just need to get a baseline of, okay, here's what we need to work with. So I'm just going to say we're working with about a foot from top of the axle to the bottom of the frame right here. I'm going to try to stick with a foot. That's where I want the truck to ride, and we can adjust everything accordingly. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and check just to make sure that nothing's crazy here, that basically the axle is more or less aligned with the truck. If it's not, you know, if it's been in an accident or something or whatever, you want to make sure that the axle is where it needs to be so that we don't have to touch it. We're going to tack it in place, remove all the stuff we don't need, and then weld on our link bars. And that way you're not even measuring at all, other than setting up the bars, making sure that they're all the same length and stuff like that. And as we go, I'm going to explain it. It's very simple. The only couple main things is just making sure that you're starting from a good point. Like I said, we're going to make sure that nothing's crazy here. The axle isn't shifted way far one side to the other, which this one is not. And then the other big thing, which if it's a stock truck, your pinion angle should be more or less good enough. We can tweak it a little bit later. We have adjustment in the link bars, but it should be good enough to where all we have to do is get rid of the leaf springs. We're going to tack the axle before we take the front hangers off. We're going to tack the axle to the frame, and that way this axle can't move while we're working on cutting our old brackets off and stuff like that and welding on our new suspension. So real quick, I'm going to explain your pinion angle, because I think that's probably the biggest question I get a lot of times. All right, I'm going to do my best to try to explain the pinion angle as simply as I can, just to give you an idea. So basically, the idea is whatever angle, your engine transmission is always going to be somewhat sitting on a rear wheel drive vehicle pretty much. I'm going to say 99% of them are going to have somewhat of an angle drop down in the back. So at the transmission in the back, usually you're going to have something like 3 to 5 degrees of angle looking down the back. This is our reference line for the ground, so you can kind of tell that we're looking down the back. So whatever, in our case, we have a one-piece drive shaft. So whatever angle this is at, we need to match it in the opposite direction. So basically we have let's just say 3 degrees looking down here, okay, in a negative, and that back here we've got a 3 degree positive. So the drive shaft can be almost at like any angle. You know, obviously that's pretty excessive, but for sake of explaining it, it can be at any angle. Let's go over here and we can kind of depict that a little bit. So here, let's just say this is our rear pinion and this is our engine. That drive shaft can essentially be at any angle as far as elevation change here. But the thing that can't really change is your angle at your transmission and your angle at your pinion back here. So if this is 3 degrees and this is 3 degrees, they need to offset each other, because when a drive shaft rotates, it's actually pushing and pulling in a sense. It speeds up and slows down depending on where it's at in its rotation. So if you're off, say you got one here and your engine is sitting more of an angle or vice versa, that drive shaft is spinning at different speeds because you don't have a matching pinion angle. So that's where you get vibration in your drive shaft and all that. So what we want to do is we want to basically get our pinion and our transmission to be parallel with each other. Does that make sense? If you have a 2-piece drive shaft, sometimes, I would say a lot of times the 2-piece drive shaft is like in the brake, it'll come straight out from the transmission most times. And then that would obviously, you would keep 3 degrees here, 3 degrees here. And then when it drops down to your pinion, we're not depicting it correctly, but when it drops down to your pinion, that's where you want to make sure that this here, whatever where your carrier bearing would sit, you want that measurement to the pinion to be offset each other basically. So whatever this is, we need to match it with this. It just needs to be parallel with each other. They can be offset, just needs to be parallel with each other. And I'll try to explain a little better as we go. First thing we're gonna do now is try to get rid of some of this stuff. Also, don't do like I did. I'm pretty sure this tank is like almost slap full, and we do need to get it out of the way for what we're doing. So that's gonna be somewhat of a challenge, but I might be able to get away with it for now, leaving it like that, but eventually we're gonna take it out so we can clean this whole back end up and get it painted and stuff like that. First step is gonna be to, I've already got obviously the axle sitting on stands down there. I'm going to remove the shocks so that we're not fighting against them whenever we go to take the springs off. But you'll see as we go. I'm gonna set it up on the tripod and try to document it as I go. Try to explain it as simple as I can. It's really not difficult. It's just, you gotta kind of think about it as you go. So. So far, all I've done is I've gotten rid of the shocks, so we're not fighting against those. And I have put a jack stand on the back of the truck and lift the back end up so that I can get the bolts out of the leaf springs without them springing. And we're gonna go ahead and verify. So we're actually extended beyond where we need to be. So yeah, we're about 14 right now. So we're 2 inches above where the truck was sitting to get these out. But we're gonna go ahead and just kind of check and see. If you can tell, we've got a natural looking up of this here pinion. So right now, say we got 4.7, and then up here, I'm going to use this here little counterweight or counter shaft or whatever this is. I'm going to put it against that because that's going to pretty much depict our angle, and we've got 4.9. So we're really close as to where we need to be as far as our pinion. So I'm happy with that. We're just double checking. If I was to drop this back down, because there's no load on the back end, when I drop this frame down, we're going to be changing our pinion angle by bringing this here forward. So what we want to do is, once we get this free, we're going to leave it as it sits right here. We're going to go ahead and figure out, we're going to get some brackets tacked in here to hold the axle so that we can take the leaf springs off without the axle rotating on us or moving front to back or left to right or anything. We don't want the axle to move. We want it to stay right where it's at. And then we're going to work on getting rid of the leaf springs and anything else that's in our way right now. So I got the axle tacked in place. There's really no rhyme or reason why I did it the way I did it, other than just I'm trying to get it somewhere where it's out of my way. So the first bit that I'm working on here, just trying to get the leaf springs off so I can clean this area up right here, because our 4-link bracket will go, basically it's going to go on the outside of the frame. So I need all this cleaned up. So therefore this is going to be out of the way. Same thing over there. Once the 4-link is on, then I can take them off, but I probably get the Panhard bar situated beforehand, possibly. We'll see as we go. But I'm about to cut these U-bolts off so I can get the leaf springs out of here, and then we can start cleaning the axle up. All right, so everything is off the frame as far as it's in the way. I'm pretty sure I may have to modify, I might have to trim up these members here just a little bit. We'll see. But next order of business is we need to get rid of these perches because they're going to be in our way. And over here, same thing. I don't really know what this is. I can't remember what that is, but that's got to go. And then we're going to cut some stiffener plates to go here. I'll explain that when we go. And then we got to cut the perch off this side. But basically, we've got a clean slate now, if you will, and we just need to get our brackets, our 4-link bars on, so that way this axle doesn't move from here, and then we can get rid of our supports and our braces. So there's no rhyme or reason. I don't know if I said this already. There's no rhyme or reason why I did what I did, but it's just trying to keep the axle from moving. And here I'm probably going to. You need to keep the on this second gen, you're going to need to keep something in here because this is how the part of the frame is secured in here. Your build may be different. You know, this is just what I'm working on. I have done before is I just grind them down and then I'll just build up a weld bead on it, so more or less create a rivet. I may do that, or I may knock them out and make and just put some 1/2-inch bolts in it, because that's what they are, 1/2 inch. So I'm gonna work on getting the axle cleaned up. And all we're gonna do is get rid of these perches, grind it up. Gotta hold this out of the way. We gotta, I'm gonna be eventually taking this apart, so I may just go ahead now and take it apart. So that way we can get the axle out and get it cleaned up once everything's all said and done with that. So let's get the axle cleaned up, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so axle is cleaned up. I had a pretty good rust spot underneath where that perch was, right here underneath the centering pin there. So it was pretty rusty, it was pretty deep, so I just grinded it down, filled it up with weld, grinded it back down. On both sides here, we're cleaned up. I need to confirm that the brackets and everything that I have are gonna work with the placement. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my 4-link bars together, and then I can confirm where this bracket is going to go, and then we will cut some stiffener plates to go there. So I'm going to go ahead and start assembling the link bars. I should have thought about this ahead of time and went ahead and painted them, because assembling them and then taking them back apart is just kind of a little pain to do. So I wish I just would have painted them first, but we got to keep rolling here, so we ain't got time for that. We're gonna go ahead and put them together, and I'm gonna show you how to set these up to where you really don't have to measure except for one time, and or you really don't have to measure if you so choose. So I'm gonna get these put together, and then I'll show you how they're gonna go on the truck and be in line with each other. So once you have them all together, this one here is a little messed up because I wasn't able to, well, I didn't get the inner bushing out, or the inner sleeve, before I put the rest of them on. But you take all the sleeves out before you put the bushings on. Makes it a lot easier. Lube them up, that way you get them apart easier and help them go together better. So once you got all that together, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with take 2 bolts, and we're going to get one set where we want it. So it doesn't really matter. We're going to try to aim for a little less than middle of the length we have here. So what you want to do is take this out, measure it, at least get half of the thread engagement. That way you have room to adjust in and out. But we're going to get one set, and then we're going to match every other one to this one, and then they will essentially all be the same without having to use a tape measure. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so once you have them all set, I am going to take a measurement to make sure, well, I guess not to make sure, but to make sure I can match up whenever I go to put it back together. So we're on the outside of this one, so we're going to go to the inside here, and we're at 44 1/8. So when I go to take them all apart, I'm going to go write that number down, so when I go put them back apart on center, they're 44 1/8, and that'll get us pretty close to where we started at. Okay, so now that we have everything laid out, ready to go together, we're going to go ahead and put the brackets, the front and the back. I always put the adjusting in the rear because it's usually angled down. If I were to have it at the front, over time, water, what have you, could creep into the threads and more or less mess them up more than they need to be. So I always put these at the bottom or on the axle. So I'm going to start with there's a bracket's going to go this way, and they're going to be opposites. So one's going that way, one's going that way, and same thing down here. We'll get them together, and then we'll show you what to do next. Got them together, and this is about where it's going to go, just to give you an idea how it's going to look on here. I'm going to go work now on getting some gussets here, or some stiffener plates cut out. So the reason I'm going to cut some 1/4 inch plate, and the reason we do that is because on 1/8 inch plate, basically 1/8 inch plate doesn't have enough. There's too much deflection in it. So when you take a piece of metal or something, you bend it back and forth enough, and then it breaks. That's basically what happens when you don't stiffen up this here 1/8 inch, because there's just, as the suspension flexes and travels, eventually the weld here, it's just going to try to break it free. So we're going to bump it up. We're going to stiffen the whole area with some 1/4 inch, and then we're going to weld the bracket right to that, and that'll be good there. This side's pretty good. I don't think I'm gonna have to modify that at all. I'm possibly gonna have to modify the this here parking brake cable bracket, which it's not a big deal. It's just got to be somewhat in the same area. It doesn't have to be in this exact position, It's just got to have the right amount of tension on it here and there. So we can definitely move that if we need to. But I'm going to go ahead and get some plates cut so we can fasten that to here and then get these link bars fastened in place. So I've got some plates cut here to stiffen up the frame. The only reason I did what I did here is to try to mitigate some rust there. I live in Florida, so we don't obviously get salt in the roads or anything like that. So you know, typically rust isn't that big of an issue, but I'm still going to try to help mitigate some of that. Obviously I'm going to, you know, grind it off, or I'm going to weld and stuff like that, but going to get these welded on here, and then we can go ahead and fit up our link bars. All right, so we have effectively, I guess you could say, got both sides fitted up, tacked up. There's so much caked on oil. I'm assuming it's from the fuel tank. It has to be. Fuel tank, return lines, something of that nature. But I was getting some good fire over here while I was trying to weld this. So I'm gonna wait till I pull the tank off so I can finish welding that out. But we've got these brackets tacked on, these tacked onto the axle. So basically now I am ready to, I'm gonna go ahead and drop the, or cut the braces off, cut them off, and then get our back end back down to about where we need it to be so that we can go ahead and fit up our Panhard bar. So up until this point, the only thing, you know, I've used a tape measure. I don't know why this is turning into, you know, try to do this without a tape measure, but that's just the way it goes. So anyhow, all I've done was I measured from the backside here on each side to get this about right. I didn't really spend too much time. I didn't get an overall at the front. I just kind of made it look right on both sides, and so it should work out fine. You got a little bit of leeway in the bushings and stuff like that, but yeah. So let's get these cut off, get this dropped back down. Our pinion angle now, since we were paralleled, that the pinion angle, no matter what this axle does, that pinion angle should stay where it's at in relation to the engine. So that's the benefits of a parallel setup. Yes, there are many other ways to do this. Triangulated is the other common setup you can do, but the problem with triangulated, sometimes because you have to, the lengths of your bars and your pinion angle can change more drastically if you don't have it set up quite right. You've got to do a truss on the axle most of the time, so it's just not as easy, if you will. You eliminate having to run a track bar, Panhard bar, and all that. But to me, this is the stronger way. Either way, doesn't really matter a whole lot. There's more travel out of a triangulated setup. There's other ways you can do it as well, but I just prefer this way because, in my opinion, it's stronger. So therefore, both your manipulations are right here on each side. Whereas triangulated, you would have a lot of rotation in the center. That I don't know what the terminology I'm looking for, but basically, you would almost be trying to wrap the axles in the housing here. So you definitely want to be welding those, and a truss would help out with some stuff like that as well. So again, I prefer to do it this way. To me, it's the simplest. As you can see, we just basically got rid of the old stuff and put it on here without taking the axle out, without cleaning, you know, having to take it out and clean it up, drive shaft is still in it. My opinion, it's the easier method. So getting ready to fit up the Panhard bar here. Once again, all this stuff is from Infamous Fab. There'll be a link in the description. You can either obviously buy through them or through my website. But this is a universal kit. It comes with brackets already, but these are the same brackets I used on the, if you remember the blue truck project, really, that I did but never videoed. That's the same brackets basically that came on that truck. So I'm reusing again, but we're gonna go ahead and tack this one on here like so. We've got the axle drop back down to our height off the ground, or not height off the ground, but height between the frame and the axle. So I'm gonna go ahead and tack this here, and then I can tack the other bracket on the other side, and then we can cut our bar to length. One other thing that I didn't mention here, I don't know if I mentioned it here or not, I honestly couldn't remember, but I always put a little, when I'm tacking stuff together, I always put a little, put one washer in there, and then put my thing, in this case this is a heim joint, so put the washer, put the heim in there, squeeze it all together, and then when you take it apart, it's not a super tight press fit, and therefore you can more or less pull it together to get it tight, but yet it's not, you don't have to pry it apart to get it together. So I do that on everything. I put one washer. The fronts up there are what they are, but these back here I always put one washer, you know, inside or outside, it doesn't really matter. Just match them on the opposite side, I guess. So gonna let this cool. I did put a couple plug welds in there, as well as weld all the way around. I'm gonna put some anti-seize on that whenever I put it back together, and then we should be done with this part of this here build. Got everything cleaned up now for this evening. I want to keep the suspension side separate because from here at this point you could do several things with the suspension. You could go very extravagant and do like a cantilever setup, coil springs, airbags, coilovers, you name it. You could do a bunch of random, or a bunch of suspension things to this. But what my goal was, I hope that I was clear enough, because my mind thinks way faster than I can speak, and sometimes I have a hard time explaining things. I know what I'm trying to say, but I have a hard time getting words out. So, but yeah, I want to keep everything separate. We got everything cleaned up here. Next part, we will address how we're going to mount the bags. That's what we're using on this, is bags. At some point, I'm not sure when, the timeline, because I'm waiting on parts for the front end, but I'm going to be taking the tank out. We're going to be building a gooseneck hitch here in the middle, so that way it's going to do two things. It's going to, one, it's going to support a gooseneck obviously, but also it'll add stability here in the center section for our air springs, our airbags. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up here. Like I said, hope I could help. Not always the case, but appreciate y'all watching, and we'll see y'all real soon on the next video. Thanks, guys. Almost forgot the one of the important things here. Sometimes it doesn't like to stick on this cabinet. Hope it can be a second. Oh. That'll be all.